Get away from that swing, Ellie, now. Marla's voice cut through the morning fog like a whip, sharp enough to snap her daughter's head around. The child froze, one hand still outstretched toward the gently swaying tire swing, its thick rope creaking softly in the mist. There was no wind, no birdsong, only that swing, still moving, as if someone had just leaped off it. Ellie stepped back without protest, sensing the shift in her mother's tone. Marla moved fast, boots crunching through last night's frost as she grabbed Ellie's shoulder and pulled her close. She wasn't afraid of old playground equipment. She wasn't even afraid of the abandoned clearing they'd stumbled on while hiking, not really. But the ground around the swing was wrong, muddy, trampled, covered in paw prints far too large to belong to anything that should have been in this forest. They stood there, mother and daughter, facing the clearing in silence. The trees were too tall and too still, arching overhead like watching figures. The forest seemed to inhale and hold its breath. A broken doll lay at the base of the swing set, its face faded and one eye missing. But what caught Marla's attention wasn't the doll, it was the tracks circling it. Not random, not messy, almost ritualistic wide paws, clawed digits too round for wolves, too quiet for bears. Marla had grown up around these mountains. She'd seen enough wildlife to know what didn't belong. These prints were something else entirely, broad, deliberate, and chillingly fresh. Let's go back, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, but Ellie didn't move. Her eyes had locked onto something in the trees behind the swing. Mama, it's watching us. Marla turned quickly, heart racing, but the woods were empty. Just rows of dark trunks and the shifting gray veil of fog. Still, her instincts screamed. She scooped Ellie into her arms and walked, fast and controlled, back toward the trail they'd wandered off. They didn't speak again until the car door slammed shut. Marla gripped the wheel, staring at her own reflection in the rearview mirror, jaw tight. She should report it, whatever it was. But to who? Animal control. The local sheriff, who still thought she was unstable after the fire that took her husband last spring. The paw prints had looked eerily familiar, though she couldn't explain why, like a symbol etched deep into some forgotten memory. That night, Marla didn't sleep. She kept the hallway light on and lay in bed, listening to the old farmhouse creak with the night winds. Around 2 a.m. she heard Ellie get up to use the bathroom, or so she thought. But when she checked her daughter's room at dawn, the bed was empty, the covers thrown back, a window cracked open, the cold morning air sliding in like a warning. Marla's panic came fast and wordless. She ran outside barefoot, calling Ellie's name into the pines. The frost stung her feet, but she kept running until she reached the tree line, and there, just beyond the edge of the property, were fresh tracks, the same prints, leading away from the house. She followed them. They wound through the brush, crossed the shallow creek behind the barn, and looped through a thicket of birch where the sunlight barely touched the moss. Marla's breath came in short, burning bursts, her throat raw from yelling, but the forest was still listening, waiting. Then she saw it, a place that shouldn't exist, a hollow almost swallowed by the earth, framed by stone and roots. It looked like a lair not built, but grown, sculpted by something with intention. Inside, it was dark, too dark for morning. Something primal clawed at Marla's chest, urging her to run. But just beyond the entrance, resting on a patch of moss, was Ellie's pink sock, still warm. Marla stepped forward. Marla stepped into the hollow as if crossing a line she couldn't come back from. The morning light died at the entrance, swallowed by an unnatural darkness that didn't belong to the hour. She blinked, eyes adjusting. The walls were stone and root, damp and strangely smooth, like something had scraped them clean with enormous claws. The air smelled faintly metallic, not rot, but something colder, like blood long dried. Her hand shook as she reached down and picked up Ellie's sock. It was damp from the moss, but unmistakably hers. The tiny flower print stitched at the hem, the one Marla had embroidered herself during those quiet weeks after the funeral, needing something to keep her fingers from shaking. Her daughter had been here recently. She turned slowly, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Ellie, her voice came out raw, too loud in the closed space. Silence answered, but not the kind that feels empty. This silence had presence. Something was listening. Behind her the wind shifted, and the faintest noise broke the silence. A shuffle, low and rhythmic. Not a growl, not a voice. A breathing sound, steady, patient. Marla turned back toward the deeper part of the lair, heart hammering. The space expanded suddenly, opening into a chamber that shouldn't have existed beneath the forest floor. The walls glistened faintly with moisture. Nestled in the far corner was a pile of leaves, fur, and something that looked like shredded cloth. A nest, too large for any known animal. And in the center of it, movement, a child's form. Ellie. She gasped, rushing forward, but she stopped dead when the shape stirred, sat up, and revealed itself. It wasn't Ellie. It looked like a child, yes, about Ellie's size, wrapped in what might once have been clothing, but its eyes were too reflective, catching the dim light like mirrors. Its skin, pale beneath streaks of grime, stretched unnaturally over joints that seemed slightly misaligned. It stared at Marla, head tilted. Then it smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing one. Behind her something moved fast, heavy paws on the stone. Marla spun just in time to see a shadow streak past the entrance of the lair. Its form, massive and low to the ground, her breath caught. That wasn't a bear. It moved with the precision of something built for stalking, and its size was wrong. Far too large, even for a grizzly. It hadn't seen her yet. Or it had, and simply didn't care. She backed away from the nest, eyes still on the not-quite child. It hadn't moved, just watched. A low whine rose in her throat as she turned, her maternal instinct screaming to keep moving. She needed Ellie, not this thing. The paw prints outside, they hadn't belonged to a single animal. There were layers to them, overlapping sizes, like generations walking in the same place, or perhaps a pack of family, something primal and organized. Marla stumbled out of the lair, the light burning her eyes like she'd been submerged too long. She collapsed to her knees in the frost, choking on a sob. But then she heard it, a cry, soft, high-pitched, human. She froze, listened. It came again. From deeper in the woods this time, Ellie's voice, Mama. Marla bolted to her feet, body moving before her mind could catch up. She sprinted, branches tearing at her arms, mud sucking at her boots. The trees blurred past, her breath ragged. She followed the sound with blind desperation, until she burst into another clearing smaller than the first, ringed with ancient oaks. And in the middle, standing barefoot in the leaves, was Ellie. Alive, eyes wide, arms hanging limp at her sides. Marla rushed forward, pulled her close, buried her face in Ellie's hair. I've got you, she whispered. You're okay. I've got you. But Ellie didn't return the hug. She stood stiff, unmoving. Marla pulled back, searching her daughter's face. Her skin was ice cold, her eyes still her own, brown and bright, held something else behind them. Something distant, faintly, shining, like the strange child in the lair. Where did you go? Marla asked, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. Who took you? Ellie blinked slowly. They didn't take me, she said, her voice soft and hollow. I followed. Then Marla's stomach dropped. Then Ellie looked past her toward the woods. The ones with the big paws. They said you'd come. Something rustled in the underbrush behind them. Marla turned, shielding Ellie, scanning the shadows. But nothing came out, just more silence. Then Ellie pulled away from her, slowly, and pointed back toward the trees. They're waiting. Marla tried to hold her, but the girl stepped back. Her body moved stiffly, like her muscles were still learning how to work, like something was wearing her shape and trying to remember how to be a child. The wind shifted again. This time Marla smelled it clearly, a scent of soil and blood and fur. The clearing darkened, not with clouds but with presence. Something was approaching, and then, between the trees, the first pair of glowing eyes appeared, followed by another, and another, ringing the clearing. They weren't animals, not exactly, and yet not quite human either. Ellie turned to face them, calm as, Sleep, Mama, she whispered without looking back. They want you to see where we live. Marla's pulse pounded in her ears. She looked at her daughter, her flesh, her blood, standing at the edge of something ancient and terrible. She had come this far for Ellie, and Ellie was no longer hers, not completely, but the forest still watched. Waiting, Marla stepped forward. Marla took one hesitant step, then another, the frostbitten ground cracking softly beneath her boots. Around the clearing, the glowing eyes remained still, fixed on her like stars that had peeled themselves off the night sky to bear witness. Ellie stood at the center of it, all too calm, to silent her small frame haloed by the golden, dying light of the forest. It felt like crossing a dream's threshold. Only Marla knew she was fully awake. The pain in her knees from falling, the sting of bark-scratched palms, the terror wrapped around her spine like wire. Something deep in her gut whispered to run, but instinct, sharpened by motherhood and grief, whispered louder, you don't leave her behind again. The moment she crossed the invisible boundary between them and the woods, the eyes blinked and disappeared, receding into the trees like vanishing embers. Ellie reached for her hand without a word. Marla hesitated, just for a breath, then clasped it. The child's skin felt wrong, too cold, too smooth, but she gripped tight, like she always had during thunder or fevers. They walked. The forest changed, subtly at first. The trees grew taller, older. Their trunks gnawed in ways that suggested faces and fingers. Moss crept higher. The air grew thicker, more humid, as if they were descending into something, though the terrain remained level. The path narrowed. Ahead, flickers of movement darted between the trees, too fast to fully register. Shapes, shadows, watching senses stretched thin, catching every crackle and rustle, but nothing attacked. They were being escorted, not hunted. She didn't know which terrified her more. After what felt like an hour, maybe more, the path opened into a wide basin. The canopy thinned above, revealing a broken patch of gray sky. And nestled there, half hidden by vines and branches, was a structure that looked like ruins, but not man-made. Bone and stone interwoven, rib-like arches rising from the ground, curved and organic, leading into a hollow that pulsed faintly with amber light. The architecture defied logic, as if it had been grown rather than built. It breathed. Ellie tugged at her hand. This is where they keep the others. Marla crouched, gripping her daughter's shoulders. The others. Ellie looked away, toward the opening in the lair. The ones who came looking, like you. The word struck like a slap. The ones who came looking. She wanted to demand answers, scream at the forest, shake Ellie back to sense, but her voice caught. Her daughter was here, alive, changed, yes, but not gone, not yet. Marla straightened and walked toward the entrance. The shadows inside shimmered with heat, and the air shifted as she stepped across the threshold. The interior was far larger than it looked. A cavern, a nest, a cathedral of living root and rock. The walls pulsed with veins of faint bioluminescence, casting a warm golden light that somehow chilled the blood. They weren't alone. Figures lined the chamber, crouched or sitting on elevated perches made from bark and bone. Some appeared human, at least in silhouette, but their movements betrayed them. Too fluid, too silent. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim, just like Ellie's had. One figure stepped forward, taller than the others. A woman or something close, draped in tattered robes that shimmered like wet leaves, her skin etched with branching lines like roots beneath the surface. Her hair was thick and matted with moss, her eyes deep pools of black, rimmed in gold. "You've come far," she said, her voice like falling water. "Most mothers don't make it." Marla held Ellie tighter. "I'm not most." A faint smile touched the woman's lips. "No, you're willing. That makes you useful." Marla's eyes flicked around the chamber. "What is this place?" The woman stepped closer, a crossing, a cradle, a refuge, for those born of fur and fang, for the forgotten, for what the world has cast out and buried under stories. "Why, Ellie?" Marla's voice cracked. "She's just a child." She followed the song, the woman said simply. "Only those who hear it can." "I didn't hear any song." "Because you buried it long ago. Most adults do." Marla's fingers trembled against Ellie's back. "I want her back. The real her." The woman tilted her head. "Then come see what she's becoming." She turned and led them to a central platform where something stirred beneath layers of leaves and woven fur. Marla's breath caught as the shapes shifted, small bodies, children maybe a dozen, some sleeping, others watching with wide, too bright eyes. Their features flickered between animal and human, a boy with pointed ears and paws curled under his chin. A girl whose back rose and fell with the slow rhythm of hibernation. "They were lost," the woman said softly. "Abandoned. Or taken. The forest offers them sanctuary. We give them form." "You mean you change them?" "We awaken what was always there." Ellie let go of Marla's hand and stepped toward the others. They welcomed her with slow nods, wordless and gentle. She sat among them as if she had always belonged. Marla felt something shatter in her chest. She wanted to scream, to grab her daughter and run. But where would they go? Ellie was changing, already changed. And something in Marla, as much as she hated it, understood why. The woman placed a hand on her shoulder. It was warm, too warm. "She can stay, if you leave, or you can stay, too." Few mothers are offered the choice. Marla looked at Ellie, smiling now. Her posture relaxed for the first time in days. Safe, accepted, but something was missing. Her laughter, her warmth, her light. Marla turned to the woman, voice barely a whisper. "And if I try to take her back?" The woman's eyes darkened. "Then she'll forget you, and the forest will close." Outside, the wind picked up. The swing creaked in the distance, and somewhere, far above, the normal world waited, faded and unfamiliar. Marla looked at her daughter, then at the lair, then closed her eyes. They didn't speak much on the way home. The gravel road wound between the trees like a trail of memory, brittle and slow, and Marla kept one hand on the wheel and the other gently resting over Ellie's fingers. Her daughter hadn't let go of her since they left the clearing. In the car, not while she climbed into the passenger seat still barefoot, not even as she stared out the window with that haunted stillness children shouldn't know. The girl's body was warm now, the blood returned to her limbs, but something inside her hadn't fully come back. Not yet. Marla knew better than to push. The old instincts mothering after tragedy were coming back with an eerie clarity. She remembered the days after the fire, when Ellie would wake in the middle of the night, gasping, confused, and ask if Daddy was still smoke. She remembered how words failed then too, how all she could do was sit beside her, hold her through the silence, and wait. She would do the same now. When they pulled into the gravel drive, the farmhouse looked smaller somehow, as if something in them had grown too large to fit inside it. Marla killed the engine. Ellie was already unbuckling herself, movement slow but certain. The child's eyes scanned the yard, as if expecting to see a set of paw prints in the frost, or the faint shimmer of golden light along the tree line. But there was nothing, just wind and crows and the rusted weather vane squealing overhead. Inside, the house welcomed them with creaks and dust motes. It smelled like pine cleaner and cold ash. Marla helped Ellie into a fresh pair of socks, warmed milk on the stove, and lit the small fire in the living room hearth. Ellie sat close to it, hugging her knees, gaze fixed on the flames. Marla sat beside her but didn't touch her. Not yet. The connection was there, but delicate, like the bridge between two cliffs after a long storm. It would hold, in time, but not now. Now was for waiting. That night, Ellie slept in Marla's bed. She curled against her mother like she had when she was a toddler, before the fire, before the silence that had taken root in their home. Marla stayed awake for hours, listening to the girl's breathing settle, feeling the rise and fall of her ribs beneath the quilt. She couldn't explain what had happened, couldn't name the thing that had taken her daughter or the world beneath the roots that had nearly kept her. All she knew was that Ellie had chosen to come back, and that meant something. Something big, something holy. In the days that followed, Ellie changed, slowly. Not back to who she was. Marla didn't think that version would ever return, but into something else, something more deliberate. She didn't laugh as much, but when she did, it came from deeper. She spent long hours outside, even in the cold, walking the edge of the woods as if she were waiting for them to call again. Sometimes, she would press her ear against the bark of the big pine by the barn and stand there quietly, eyes closed. Marla let her. She didn't scold, didn't fear. The forest had given Ellie back. She wouldn't demand more than that. One afternoon, weeks later, as winter began its slow retreat into thaw, Marla found Ellie in the attic sorting through an old cedar chest. The girl held a photograph, faded, grainy from when she was 2. Her father's arms wrapped around her, his smile wide and unburdened. Ellie looked up at Marla. "Do you think he would have followed me too?" Marla knelt beside her, heart catching. "I think he would have burned the whole forest down if it meant getting you back." Ellie nodded once, eyes returning to the photo. "Then I'm glad it was you." Marla couldn't speak. She only wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her tight. Spring came slowly. The swing in the forest remained. Marla checked it once, just once, and found it unmoved, silent, the ground beneath it clean of tracks. Still, she didn't let Ellie wander past the fence line anymore. Not because she feared the forest, but because she knew it waited, and Ellie needed time. They both did. That final night, long after the stars had spilled across the sky like scattered ash, Marla sat on the porch wrapped in an old wool blanket, mug of tea in her hands, the house quiet behind her. Ellie had gone to bed early, a small animal curled under the quilt, safe and whole for the first time in what felt like lifetimes. The wind moved through the trees, and for a moment, just a moment, Marla thought she heard a low humming. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration, a thread tugging at something buried deep in her chest. She didn't rise, she didn't answer. She simply whispered into the dark, "She's not yours anymore." The wind shifted. The night held its breath. And then, with a long, patient sigh, it moved on. Marla sat alone on the porch until the stars began to fade, and the pale hush of morning crept across the hills. The forest would always remember her. The lair beneath the roots would remain, waiting for another child lost in grief, another mother desperate enough to follow. But it would not take Ellie again, not while Marla lived, and somewhere deep in the earth, beneath the moss and frost and memory, the forest knew it.